Vanakkam, Namaskaram, and a very happy evening to all of you. The book for today is Sivakamiyin Sabatham by the famous Tamil author Kalki. I'm going to be talking about this book. The book was written in Tamil, and has been rendered in English by a couple of people. I read this as a child in Tamil only, and I feel if somebody knows Tamil, it would be better to read the book in Tamil itself and not in English, because that's the original text. Nevertheless, the translators have done full justice while translating this book, because people who have read it in English have also thoroughly enjoyed the same just as how I have. Sivakamiyin Sabatham. Sabatham, oath. Who is this Sivakami? What is this book about? And who's this Kalki? I should not be asking this question. In Tamil Nadu, it's like blasphemous, because Kalki is a very popular, well-known writer. Amaratara, Alayosai, Parthiban Kanavu, Ponniyin Selvan, Sivakamiyin Sabatham. And Kalki is the pen name of the famous writer Krishnamurti, who had been the editor of the famous magazine Kalki. His partner was none other than Mr. Sadasivam, the husband of the famous Bharat Ratna awardee, M.S. Subbulakshmi. Well, I read this book when I was about 12 or 13 years old, perhaps maybe in the early 80s, 82 or so, 81, 82, probably summer. When I was at Salem in my mother's house, we used to, go to our party video or Avalillo in Telugu, or granny's place during the summer holidays. I went to Salem, and me and my brother were the only two grandchildren at home at that point of time. And there was an old table with a radio on top, a tiny cupboard kind of a door. I opened it one day and I found a number of books belonging to my grandfather, Mr. K.C. Sampath Kumar. And I pulled out one book and I saw that it was one Sivakamiyin Sabatham. My second language in school was Hindi, but since we're living in Tamil Nadu, Tamil was not a problem. So I started reading the book because, it would take us almost a month to come back to Coimbatore, and I had to be occupied. And I took an instant liking towards the narration. What had happened is my grandfather, Sampath Kumar, had been an avid reader. He had read the book while it was being serialized in the magazine Kalki. Like teleserials, those days magazines had serials too, and those serials were extremely popular. He had pulled out all those stories which came in the serial form and bound them separately and kept. In that collection, I found 4 volumes of Sivakamiyin Sabatham. When the printed book came out, say in the year 1948 or so, they said that it was, 1011 pages. I have that copy with me. 1011 pages, Sivakamiyin Sabatham. Badru's Book Depot, Arunachal Achari Street, Salem. The illustrations had been done by Maniyam, Chandra and Raghavan. Maniyam was a very, very well-known illustrator, and Kalki was associated with Rajaji. I could talk about Kalki for a couple of hours. He was a great man. Did not live very long. He was in his 50s when he passed away, but nevertheless, his work is immortal. I remember attending the centenary celebrations of Kalki at Coimbatore, and the famous, I think if I'm not mistaken, the famous journalist and political observer Cho Ramaswamy was the chief guest or the guest of honor on that day. Kalki had written this book at a time when the country was in the throes of colonial influence and it had to wake up. The book Parthiban Kanavu or Parthiban's Dream had come out in 1936, I think, and this book came some years later. The Sivakamiyin Sabatham is connected with the reign of the great Pallava emperor Mahendravarma Pallava, who ruled between 600 to 630 AD. Nowadays, they are of the opinion that it could have been from 590 AD itself, and also connected with the son Vatapi Konda Narasimhavarma Pallava or Narasimhavarma Pallava the first, who ruled between 630 and 68 AD. This book is a marvelous book. It gives us the best of everything that we want. The author Kalki has examined the situation during the 7th century and brought it out in a beautiful manner. The story connects itself to the invasion of Pulikesin II of Vatapi to Kanchipuram, and then thereafter rebuttal by Narasimhavarma Pallava in 642 AD, wherein he conquers Vatapi and the Chalukyan kingdom, and Pulikesin II is killed in battle. In this is the setting. The author has brought to life Kanchipuram, Mamallapuram, the Mandapattu village, Vatapi. And not only that, each and every character found in this book has been portrayed in a marvelous manner. The readers would feel that they are actually going into the heart, the mind of the person about whom the narration is made. Many of the characters have been described in a chapter connected with them only. Like, for example, Vanama Devi, the consort of Narasimhavarma Pallava. She was a Pandyan princess. You go and look at that chapter. It is named after her and her character is brought out. It's beautiful. Well, what is all this? We understand through history that India was a fantastic civilization. The author says that the civilization in Kanchipuram and in Tamil Nadu was second to none in the world. And it was at the peak of the Bhakti movement where art, music, dance flourished. International commerce was the order of the day, and Kanchipuram was a very famous international center, besides being the capital of the Pallava kingdom, which was the main kingdom south of the Tungabhadra river those days, between 575 AD and say about 850 AD. The first emperor was Simha Vishnu Avani Simha. His son Mahendravarma Pallava was the second emperor, and Narasimhavarma Pallava was the third emperor. Then Mahendra II was the fourth emperor. Of course, it continued till Aparajita Pallava, who comes into the Chola period in the 9th century, actually. And Sivakami is none other than a famous dancer who was adept in Bharatanatyam. She had mastered Bharata Shastram, and her performance was second to none. She was perhaps very talented, very pretty, and very determined a person, a very strong-minded person. She is like, a very strong-willed lady, but also at the same time very affectionate, very considerate, and she was clearly focusing on what she wanted in life. Her father was the famous sculptor who was known as Ayanar, or known as Ayanar Chirpi. Sivakami had lost her mother when she was really young. She was living on the outskirts of Kanchipuram along with her father and one aunt. She grew up under that atmosphere. The father would ask her to pose and he would keep on, using his chisel and work on stone, and he produced timeless pieces. He wanted to know the secret behind the Ajanta paintings and why they were everlasting. That was his craze, rather. He knew nothing else other than sculpting his only beloved child Sivakami, who had a parrot called Sukabrahma Rishi as her companion, and a doe called Rati. And there was a small garden behind and probably a tiny pond full of lotuses. In Tamil Nadu, wherever you find water bodies, all these tiny ponds, you can see them full of lotuses. And Tamil Nadu can be called as the land of the lotus that way. It is a national flower. So this is the setting. On the other side, you have the city of Kanchipuram, which had been described by Bharavi as Pushpeshu Jaji, Purusheshu Vishnu, Narishu Ramba, Nagareshu Kanchi. Jaji, the best amongst flowers. Purusheshu Vishnu, Vishnu the best amongst men. Narishu Ramba, Ramba the best amongst women. Nagareshu Kanchi. Kanchipuram, the best amongst cities. Bharavi, the author of Kirtarjuniyam, had given this kind of an impression of Kanchipuram, according to the author. And this had encouraged or motivated a number of people to come to Kanchipuram. And it had also encouraged Pulikesin II, the mighty Chalukyan ruler, to invade Kanchipuram around 630 AD or so. Pulikesin was the ruler between the two big rivers of India. The area between the two big rivers of India, the Narmada and the Tungabhadra. Above the Narmada till the Himalayas, it was Harshavardhana. From Tungabhadra to the Kaveri, it was the Pallavas. And below that, the Pandyas. Of course, the Talakat, Gangas and other smaller rulers were also ruling. But these were the predominant powerful empires of those times. Now coming to Mahendravarma Pallava. He was greatly interested in music, in art, dance, drama. He was a born Hindu who had become a Jain and then had come back to Hinduism. A Garvapasi of sorts for those days. He was a patron of the finer things in life. He believed in eternal peace. His kingdom was very prosperous. Unfortunately, the clever Mahendravarma Pallava had forgotten to look into the defense mechanism of his kingdom, and therefore was shocked to learn that Pulikesin was invading Kanchipuram. He was known as Mattavilasha Prashna. a play written by him, Gunabara, because of his good qualities, Chitrakara Puli, because he was a tiger amongst painters, Vichitra Chitta, for being myriad-minded. These are his 4 titles. A very noble ruler who lived for his kingdom, and he wanted his son Narasimha to look at the kingdom first and his personal life next or much later. And where is the origin of this mighty Pallava kingdom? Stories say that long before, on the eastern coast, the people suddenly found a ship rocking, going down, and then they found a small casket floating and coming on a couple of logs, and this comes into the land. They open it and they find a child, and that child is named as Thondaiman Ilantirayan, who happens to be the first Pallava ruler, and therefore that region of Tamil Nadu or peninsular India came to be known as Thondai Mandalam. We must remember that Tamil Nadu state has the second longest coastline in India after Gujarat, 1076 kilometers as of today. It must have been like that before itself. So that story, the chapter is called Kadal Tanda Kulandai, the child which was given by the sea. Kadal means sea. So that great lineage, and then Mahendra Varma Pallava, then Narasimha. We find the main characters to be one Paranjoti, one Naganandi, and many others. Who's this Paranjoti? He is from the Chola kingdom. He comes to Kanchipuram in order to learn, but he gets to meet this famous Buddhist monk called Naganandi. And through this monk Naganandi, he gets to meet Sivakami's father. And Sivakami's father is patronized by the mighty Pallava ruler. And Paranjoti is sent to the north. Under the instructions of Naganandi, but well covered. Naganandi does not expose himself because he is the master spy of the Chalukya kingdom. So they acquire a horse and a royal pass to let Paranjoti go up north. The idea of Naganandi is to let Paranjoti meet Satyashraya Pulikesin II, give him a letter and ask him to come fast so that they can take Kanchi in a matter of 3 days. But the very smart and alert Mahendra Varma Pallava, who is known for his espionage skills and wearing varied costumes, he follows Paranjoti, goes along with him, waylays the letter, and then meets Pulikesin in incognito, and somehow delays the arrival of Pulikesin by about 8 to 9 months. He strengthens the fort meanwhile and saves the city of Kanchipuram. So Kanchipuram had 7 Kanchipurams: Shaiva Kanchi, Jina Kanchi, Bauddha Kanchi, Vishnu Kanchi. So it was a very important center of commerce and learning. Beautiful temples around. The Ekambreshwara temple is spoken about here. Then the Bhakti movement was, flourishing. You get to see a couple of Nayanmars in this story. Tirunavukkarasar, Kulachirayar, Mangayar Karasi, Nindrasir Nedumaranar. 4 Nayanmars can be found in this narration of Kalki. Well, this story has this line: the invasion of the Chalukyas, the rebuttal of the Pallavas after a dozen years or so. But the theme is woven around the romance between the dancer Sivakami and Narasimha Varma Pallava. Both of them grow up simultaneously. But for 3 years, Narasimha goes away for studies and on a tour of the country, and he comes back. He comes back as a handsome looking, dashing, chivalrous young man. And Sivakami, with whom he had played, had grown up to be a very pretty damsel. And when he comes back to see her, she will run away because, she'll feel shy and modest, and she'll look at him from behind, and both of them fall in love. And the romance is so beautifully portrayed. They exchange letters through palm leaves, and it is hidden in a tree. A hole in a tree is the custodian for all this. And Sivakami feels for a moment that the entire Pallava kingdom need not exist for her. She just wants to live with her lover, her companion, marry him and live with him. That's all. And she, has she gets angry if she is not acknowledged. She becomes suspicious. She becomes jealous. But all this is because of the deep love that she nurtures for Narasimha Varma Pallava. And Narasimha is also deeply in love with her. Mahendra Varma Pallava knows about this love and romance, and he does things which he's not supposed to be doing. He lets his master spy Shatrughna bring the love letters. He reads that, and he says that he's doing something that should not be done by a father, and he's doing so in the interest of the empire. And he also says, this wretched empire is making me do all this. I feel so sad to scratch the inner feelings of my dear son and look into all that. So this is the setting. And Narasimha Varma Pallava is one of those dashing warriors, either ready to win a war or die in the battlefield. And friends, when Pulikesin invades the kingdom, he comes with an army of 500,000 soldiers and 15,000 elephants and a large cavalry. While the Pallava army consisted of hardly 100,000 soldiers and maybe about 100 elephants and a weak fortress. The book was written in the first half of the 20th century, so perhaps the author felt that our country had not looked after its defenses well, nor did the country stay united, therefore it had to face external aggression. So you can look at the situation mirrored in this book, but in this story, not in the way that it was present in India at that time. So Narasimha wants to fight this war. He wants to go out and fight, win or die. But Mahendra Varma Pallava tells him, my dear son, I had never seen a battle because my father had already done the job. I was happy with dance, music, drama, literature, commerce, and peaceful coexistence with other monarchies in the world. And this has come in as a shock. I wanted to one day invite Pulikesin to Kanchipuram as my guest, but I never thought that he's going to be invading us. Invitation it had to be, but it has become an invasion. Narasimha, this war has happened because of my approach, my attitude, my aptitude, and whatever that I did or whatever that I inherited, whatever that I was careful of or whatever that I was not. Let me fight this war on my terms, my dear son. You may fight this the way that you want. If I cease to exist, or if we do not win the war, or in the future. And the energetic Narasimha holds himself back because he fully understands that his father is a clever, intelligent and wise man, and not only that he was a ruling monarch. And the Council of Ministers had completely reposed faith in his father. and the commander-in-chief also. Therefore, Narasimha did not want to, toss the apple cart by being disobedient. Narasimha is given opportunities to fight with the Gangas of Talakad, defeat the ruler Durvinithan, and then also fight with the Pandyas. The author has taken a few liberties. The war actually comes into the format of a siege, and after that a ceasefire is declared. Pulikesin visits Kanchipuram, at which time Narasimha sent away an expedition, and after going out of Kanchipuram, Pulikesin tries to destroy some of the sculptures which are found outside, and Mahendravarma goes out to fight in Manimangalam and is hit by poisoned arrow and he becomes sick. And meanwhile, Sivakami, the great dancer, the independent artist and the lover of Narasimha, due to various ploys and reasons, is imprisoned and taken off to Vatapi. Mahendravarma Pallava is aghast. He tells his son, my dear Narasimha, go to Vatapi, bring her back. Narasimhavarma Pallava goes to Vatapi. He talks to Sivakami. He tells her, you please come back with me, our kingdom, we want you back. But Sivakami says, no, I cannot come away like this. You come with a large army, defeat Pulikesin, and then take me back. And Narasimha has no choice, he just returns. He goes in incognito, he could have smuggled her out of Vatapi, but because of the approach of Sivagami, he comes back. He comes and tells his father. His sick father tells him, thank God that Sivagami did not come. Why? Your Highness. And he says, Narasimha, this kingdom has to be protected. We have a hereditary responsibility towards our culture, our tradition, our religion, and our country. You cannot have a personal life or a private life of your own. You should live for the kingdom. You are my only child. I don't want this kingdom to perish. If she had come, I would have married her and made her your stepmother. This shocks Narasimha. He says, thank God Sivakami did not come. And then Mahendravarma Pallava passes away. And at around that point of time, due to the compulsions that were prevalent at that time, Narasimhavarma Pallava marries Vanama Devi, the Pandyan princess. Beautiful woman, chaste queen. You can call her whatever you want. She comes to live here and she gives birth to Mahendra and Kundavi. The story of Kundavi comes in the book Parthiban Kanavu. So she lives along with Narasimha. That is one part of the story. On the other side, you have people like Tirunavukkarasar, the great Nayanmar. Then you have Kannapiran, the charioteer of Mahendravarma Pallava, his wife Kamali, who happens to be a friend of Sivakami. And also you have Gundodara as spy. Then you have Ranjini, somebody who was in love with Naganandi, the Buddhist monk, who is none other than the twin brother of Pulikesin II. Naganandi is actually in love with Sivakami. And therefore, he creates a situation wherein Sivakami herself is forced to travel to Vatapi and stays in Vatapi for nearly 10 years, and then she comes back. By the time she comes back, Narasimha has married Vanama Devi, has had 2 children, but no one had told her. She gets to see the royal victory procession and she's shocked and she cries. And thereafter, she decides to get married and she tells her father, Father, I want to get married. And then she marries Lord Ekambareshwara, the god in Kanchipuram, Lord Shiva, Ekambreshwara. And she fixes her mind completely on Ekambreshwara. There is a song, Talepattal, Talevantale Tens, wherein, she's completely focused on Ekambreshwara. The same song, when she had performed earlier in front of the great saint Appar, her mind was searching for Narasimhavarma Pallava. But at the end of the story, when we see she would be dancing in front of Ekambreshwara, her mind would be fully focused on him. And Narasimhavarma Pallava would actually come inside the temple, would see her dancing. And he would just for a minute think of his complete past. He'll have a drop or two of tears in his eyes. And he'll understand that there are people around, he'll wipe them off. And he will quietly go back. And that is the climax. As a young boy, I wanted to be like Mahendra Varma Pallava, and I also wanted to be like Narasimhavarma Pallava, and so were many other people. And when Sivakamiyin Sabatham was republished by Kalki, I found a letter written by Suresh Krishna, one of the statesman entrepreneurs of India, chairman of Sundaram Fasteners Limited. He had been a youngster and his mother had asked him to read Sivakamiyin Sabatham. And he had written a note to Kalki, which was published. The foreword to the book was written by Dr. Subbrayam, a great statesman, politician of those times. And Kalki himself says that the people of the past must have been great people, very selfish. They still continue to stay in our minds. Let me tell you, dear friends, when I read this book, my mind went into 7th century Kanchipuram. I was caught in a time machine. I saw everybody in close quarters. I just wanted to be with them and them only. I never wanted to come to the 20th century. Even now, when I reread the book, I was transported once again to my childhood days, my feelings which the tender mind of mine had at that time, and how the feelings of the tender hearts of Narasimha and Sivakami could have been, and how this Naganandi, who was in love with Sivakami, it's a triangular love. Naganandi wants to be with Sivakami, and Sivakami is in love with Narasimhavarma Pallava, who has duties to accomplish and therefore is found in a catch-22 situation. In this book, we find while this is going on, they also talk about Bhuvanamadevi, the consort or the Patta Mahishi of Mahendra Varma Pallava. She says that while she lifted the crown, she found that the crown was very heavy, and she understood the burden of kingship. Those days, the kings really looked after their people. Therefore, the kingdom was weighing heavily on their minds. And though they were all hereditary monarchies, they had responsibilities. Today, those big emperors have been replaced by politicians and leaders of corporates. These corporates are like the old rulers. They have the same responsibility, and the politicians have the same responsibilities too. Kalki has pointed out by stating this only in this book, that you should learn to live beyond yourself and your family, and you will be immortal, your country will be immortal, your civilization will love you. It is because of this attitude of Mahendra Varma Pallava and Narasimha Varma Pallava that we are talking about it today. And this must have been the attitude of Mr. Kalki also. Great man, great soul. What a vision to transport this and bring it here today. While talking about Vanamadevi, he says, all these days we have never visited the bedroom of Narasimhavarma Pallava, but since the situation demands, we shall now enter his bedroom. And inside the bedroom, he talks about the bed, the two kids sleeping in the other chamber, and a conversation between Vanama Devi and Narasimhavarma Pallava, wherein it is the eve of the departure of the Pallava army to Vatapi. On the eve of the departure, they have a chat. Narasimha wants to convey a few things to his wife, and she wants to also talk freely with her husband. The king says, you take care of the son, you take care of the daughter, I give you all the powers. Just make sure that the kingdom is safe. You can do whatever you want. Just in case I do not return, you make sure that young Mahendra is prepared to assume kingship. But she says, my lord, I'm sure that I will live as a Sumangali and pass away as a Sumangali. I will always be a married woman during my lifetime. My astrologers have already told me. I have no doubt you will win and come back. All I want to do is just see you on your return. I want to watch your victory procession. And I want to vacate this space to the rightful person. And who's this rightful person? Sivakami, for whose sake you're going to Vatapi. And this is something that Vanama Devi, the queen, had never spoken to Narasimha in all those years of their marriage. And Narasimha is really shocked. He says, my dear queen, you are my queen, you are the mother of the crown prince and the princess, the daughter-in-law of Mahendra and Bhuvana Mahadevi, and you brought us prosperity. There was famine in the kingdom. After you came, there was heavy rainfall. They compared you to Indrani and hence they called you Vanama Devi. You're such a noble-hearted, kind woman. There can be no place for anybody else in my life except for you. Well, let me answer you this. Give you an answer. Sivakami and the story that you're talking about is a story of my earlier birth. I'm just going there to fulfill the promise given by myself to my father. I told him that I will defeat Pulikesen and bring Sivakami back. And Sivakami had also taken an oath. I'm going to fulfill that and come back. Never be in doubt. Then he for a moment thinks and compares Sivakami with this selfless queen Vanama Devi. Not that Sivakami is a bad woman, but she wanted Narasimha all for herself. But here was this woman who loved him deeply, but also at the same time wanted him to be happy and do whatever that he wanted to do with his life because she loved him. She wanted the person whom she loved to enjoy and be happy in life, and she thought that was real and true love. And that is brought out in a beautiful way. The author, Kalki, uses this in one of the paragraphs connected with Vanama Devi. I will read it in Tamil and then let me try to translate it for you. It is in the fourth part, the shattered dream, I can say. The first is Paranjoti Yatre, the journey of Paranjoti, how he meets and how he gets into the Pallava system. The second one is the invasion or the siege of Kanchi. The third one is Bhikshu in Kadal, which is the Naganandi, the Bhikshu is in love with Sivakami. It talks about that. The second part is Kanchi Mutrugai, and the fourth part is Sidainda Kanavu. Kanavu is dream, Sidainda means shattered. And let us now come to this page, which is connected to Vanama Devi, page number 784. Yes, this book is really big. And you know, Kalki says, who are we to describe the beauty of Vanamadevi? தபஸ்விகளுக்குள்ளே மிக கடும் தபஸ்வியான சிவபெருமானுடைய தவம் கலைவதற்கு எந்த திவ்ய சுந்தராங்கி காரணமாய் இருந்தாளோ, எவளுடைய மோகன வடிவத்தை கண்டு அந்த ருத்ரமூர்த்தியின் கோபாக்னி தணிந்து உள்ளம் குளிர்ந்ததோ, அத்தகைய உமாதேவி பூமியில் அவதரிக்க திருவுள்ளம் கொண்டபோது மதுரை பாண்டியராஜனுடைய குலத்தை அல்லவா தெரிந்தெடுத்தாள். சுடுகாட்டில் பூதகணங்களுக்கு மத்தியில் சாம்பலை பூசிக்கொண்டு தீபத்ச நடனம் புரிந்த செம்பெருமான் மண்டையோடு முதலிய தன்னுடைய கோர ஆபரணங்களை எல்லாம் அகற்றிவிட்டு சுந்தரேஸ்வரராக உருக்கொண்டு எந்த புவன சுந்தராங்கியை தேடி வந்து மனம் புரிந்தாரோ, அந்த பார்வதி தேவி பிறந்த குலம் அல்லவா பாண்டிய குலம். அப்பேற்பட்ட குலத்தில் உதித்த வானமாதேவியின் சௌந்தரியத்தை நம் போன்றவர்களால் வர்ணிக்க முடியுமா? He says, Lord Shiva, the great monk, was enamored by the beauty of Parvati and he marries her. And his mind had become very calm before he married her. And the same Parvati was born as Meenakshi in Madurai in the Pandyan lineage. And she was the prettiest of the prettiest. And in order to marry her, Lord Shiva had given up the ash on his body and replaced it with sandalwood paste. And instead of the snakes, he had worn ornaments and he had come down as Sundareshwara. So, Vanamadevi comes from that lineage, and therefore, would it be appropriate to describe her beauty, says Kalki? Yes. See, Kalki is a great narrator. I am at loss of words to talk about this. In another place, Kalki tells us the date chosen by Narasimhavarma Pallava to invade Vatapi. He does it on a Vijayadashmi. He says that kind of a Vijayadashmi comes only in 1,000 years once. And that on similar earlier Vijayadashmi, Lord Rama had begun his campaign against Ravana. So this kind of a Vijayadashmi would definitely bring in victory. And all these rulers used to visit their temples in order to seek the blessings of the Lord Almighty before they undertook a campaign. And Narasimhavarma Pallava goes to the Ekambareshwara Sannidhi or the temple in Kanchipuram. And in that, there is a prayer and an harati, and they also describe the lights in the temple and how each of them appear and where they are standing and how the light inside the temple, enhances the personalities of the members of the royal family and their aides, and how the ornaments glitter and how the costumes glitter. It is brought out beautifully, I must say. The priest, the priest comes out of the shrine, out of the sanctum, after the harati, and shares the benediction. This is also written beautifully in Tamil. Kalanai kalal udaitavarum, sirittu puramerittavarum, Gajamukhasurane kilittu avan tholai uduttavarum, நெற்றிக்கண்ணில் நெருப்பை உடையவருமான திரிபுராந்தகரின் அருளால் பல்லவேந்திரருக்கு பூரண வெற்றி உண்டாகட்டும். புலிகேசியை வதம் செய்து வாதாபியை அழித்து வெற்றி வீரராய் திரும்புக. ஜெய விஜய் பவ. காலனை காலால் உதைத்தவரும். Kalan is none other than Yama. Kal. Lord Shiva had hit him with his leg. Sirittu puramerittavarum. Tripura Dahan. With one smile, he finished Tripura. Gajamuhasurane kilittavan tholai uduttavarum. He kills Gajamuhasura and takes his skin and wears it around him, elephant skin. Gajam is elephant. Kannil neruppai udayavarum, somebody who has fire in his eye. Tripurantaka, the one who destroyed Tripurantaka. May his grace make the Pallava emperor win, kill Pulikesi, destroy Vatapi and come back. There is a pillar in Vatapi, a pillar which was established by Narasimhavarma Pallava, and therefore he is known as Vatapi Konda Narasimhan, the one who conquered Vatapi. Vatapi Kondan was his title. And his minister Paranjodi became a Nayanmar, one of the 63 apostles of Shiva. He was known as Sirutondar. And there was a beautiful icon of Lord Ganesha at the entrance of Vatapi. Paranjoti had prayed in front of that Ganesha, removed the icon and brought it to his native village, Tiruchangatangudi, near Tanjavur, Kumbakonam, and installed it in a temple. And that the Ganesha or Ganapati is known as Vatapi Ganapati. I've been looking forward to visit the temple. So there's a song also, Vatapi Ganapati, by Muthuswami Dikshatar. The book is a magnum opus, and many authors have written books connected with this, like Nandipurathu Nayagi by Vikraman, Vengayin Maindan by Akilan, Udayar by Balakumaran. That is of course based on Ponniyin Selvan, but all these books are inspired by the work of Kalki. Primarily, if you see, we understand that the cosmopolitan Pallava kingdom was responsible for the development of art, culture, temple construction, and fine sculptures, Bharatanatyam and music, and brought out the Bhakti movement in a beautiful manner. The author tells us that the same cave temples found in Sri Lanka, found in the Pallava kingdom, and found in the Chalukya kingdom are found in other parts of India also. He says the paintings, the artwork, the mission of these rulers, lot of these things were in unison, though they had disagreed with each other. This talks about a general integration of India. And he talks about this Mahabharata Mandapams, or the Mahabharata Mantaps, which Mahendravarma Pallava wants to bring out, so that stories from mythology and the epics are given to people in order to make them rise up to the occasion. And he feels that the country will be safer if people have some valor, courage, and if the army is prepared. He says that eternal vigilance is the price of peace. He does not want a country full of art drama to be overtaken by a fierce marauder. He says, you do all this. I did all this, but I had not taken care of my country. I should not miss out. I should be friendly. I should be peaceful. I should not invade, but no one can come and should not invade me or destroy my country, my civilization, my people. He also talks about some of the Buddhist and Jain people who had indulged in politics, and this is also brought out in a subtle manner where it is not religion and politics as some people say. No, he talks about religious heads indulging in politics. Kalki is very clear in whatever that is communicating. So a person of religion should, some monk or saint or head of a cult or sect or a religion or whatever, it's better that they stay away from that. Stay away from politics and interfering in the general governance of a country in the name of religion. That is what he's talking about. And he's using several situations, and we also understand that the Hindu people are extremely tolerant, because Hindu religion itself is an extremely tolerant religion, very inclusive and very interesting, very diverse, that is brought out beautifully, because you find the Sanskrit speaking students, the Tamil speaking students, the Vaishnavites, the Shaivites, all living peacefully inside Kanchipuram and in the other parts of South India. And he also talks about the Ajanta and Ellora caves. And the author tells us that Pulikesin is a great warrior, was a great warrior. That at one point of time that he had got into a conflict with Harshavardhan of Kannauj and was able to hold off the armies of Harsha. But on learning that the great Harsha, Kalki calls him Mahapurusha, Harsha began, he tells us that the armies of Harsha were being led by Harsha himself. And at that point of time, Pulikesin decides to call it a day and extends peace into his territories and that of Harshavardhana. So he also talks about Vishnuvardhana, the younger brother of Pulikesin, who invades Vengi or Rajamahendrapuram, which is Rajamundri today, and how he establishes the Eastern Chalukya lineage. All this is brought out beautifully and talks about the language called Prakrit, which is known as Prakrita Bhashe, and talks about the origin of Kannada perhaps, and a little bit about so many other things, and how Mahendra Varma Pallava is, even amidst all these confusions and other things, wants to ensure that the sculptors, the musicians and everybody else are happy and they're doing whatever that they should be doing. All of this is brought out well, and it speaks volumes about the Indians of those days. And it speaks volumes about the people in the South who were highly cultured at that time. And it also speaks volumes about the amazing vision of the author Kalki. I get to see this vision in Parthiban Kanavu, in Sivakamiyin Sabatham and Ponniyin Selvan. What a great man. He believed in national integration. He believed in oneness of the Indians, the strength of India, and he wanted it to be a very strong country. Also at the same time, he felt that you can talk peace only from a point of strength. He also says, while you're doing all this, your commerce should be good, your art, craft, culture, morals, ethics. So it's like India is a land where, the man's supposed to, or the woman or the man supposed to have 32 lakshanas or attributes. And that there were 64 arts and crafts, 64 kalegal. And 16 forms of wealth. Wealth, not just currency, but so many other forms of wealth. So 16, 32, 64. So 96 plus 16. 112. So there are so many things in India, and what a multifaceted civilization. And why did it lose out? Because of the fact that it ignored its boundaries with regard to the geographic boundary, with regard to the cultural boundary, with regard to the intellectual boundary, with regard to the commercial boundary. There are several boundaries. The geographic boundary, the commercial boundary, the intellectual boundary, the creative boundary. All these boundaries were let off one by one. All kinds of invasions. Then finally, the last 100 years saw an intellectual genocide which had not taken place before. Earlier it was religious, cultural, political, now the intellectual genocide. The author wants our country to wake up. Wanted our country to wake up. I can use that in present tense. He wants our country to wake up. And let us wake up. Let us create, a structure wherein India, the fountainhead of global philosophy, leads the world. Let Bharat once again become Mahabharat. Let India become the great India. Let us also establish these Mahabharat societies throughout the country, wherein people listen to stories, talk, exchange things connected with our country and its strength and its assets and its culture and its ethics, its morals, values, and philosophy, and once again make it great. It is getting greater, but let us make it great. I think the time has come, just as how our Prime Minister had spoken earlier, to live for India, not die for India. Now let us live for India. I'm recalling the famous speech of Narendra Modi, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 2014, where he says, the time has come to live for India. And let us live for India. This is the dream of Kalki, the dream of Mahendravarma Pallava, the dream of Narasimhavarma Pallava, the dream of Rajaraja, the dream of Rajendra. The flowering of our art and culture and civilization in the south took place under the Pallavas. If you look at the architecture and development of temples, the Bhakti movement, art, craft, music, dance, everything, it will begin with the Pallavas, 575 AD. If you want to study the history of temples in Tamil Nadu particularly, and it will go up to the end of the last Nayak ruler, Meenakshi, in 1736. All the temples that you will find in Tamil Nadu, you will find, inscriptions connected to the rulers who were within this period, 575 AD to 1736 AD. And rightfully so, Tamil Nadu is the temple country of the world. Just as how Kerala is God's own country, Tamil Nadu is the temple country of the world, friends. This should be our theme. And this can promote cultural tourism, cultural economics, so many things. And this was what was happening those days. Teachers, students, dance, music, temples, all of this created a circular economy. And that circular economy is brought out so well by the author. He talks about the old defense system, how there was a moat around the fort and that there were crocodiles, and how elephants were given arak so that they will mindlessly attack the forts or kill people. And he also talks about the food consumption of the elephant. And on the other side, he says that the siege of Kanchi had only made the Chalukyas weaker because they did not find enough food to eat or to feed the elephants. So, Mahendravarma Pallava tries to sort out the problem of his times with his own techniques, with his intellect, with his capacity, with his ability, and also lets his son experience all this and resolve this issue with his own skills, with his own mindset. So there is a kind of continuity and also freedom. He lets his son do what he wanted to do after assuming power only. And they also talk about the royal responsibilities. Mahendravarma very clearly tells Narasimha, my dear son, you are in love with Sivakami, I know. But please do remember that you have a kingdom. The personal loves and likes of a monarch should not be considered. They should be kept away in the interest of the people and in the interest of the country. You have a responsibility, and that is the royal responsibility. In today's world, it is the political and the corporate responsibility. The first time I reviewed this book was at the Coimbatore Book Club in the year 2002, exactly 20 years before. The first time I read it was in 1982, 20 years before that. I've read this book about 2 or 3 times or maybe more. While I reviewed this book, I had this corporate captain, late Shri LG Varadaraj of LG Equipments, chairman of the LG group of companies, who was who is known as the father of corporate governance in this part of the country. He heard me out and he was very happy. He said, I fully understand the quintessence of Kalki's communication. He was an elderly man at that time, almost like maybe 75 years old. And it was a great moment. I went on and on for almost an hour, and everybody was listening to me not because of me, but because of the subject Sivakamiyin Sabatham and the work of Kalki, the great author. I'm so happy, dear friends, to once again talk about Sivakami, the beautiful dancer, in whose skills Bharata's Natya Shastra saw its pinnacle. When I read this book when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I thought the greatest form of dance is Bharatanatyam, and the greatest thing with regard to sculptures was chiseling with your free hand and bringing something beautiful outside. I thought there could be no greater things, and I'm sure if you read this book, you will be convinced. Get yourself a copy of Sivakamiyin Sabatham in whichever language it is available, and please do read. You'll definitely love it. My narration is nothing. It's a minuscule of a tribute, I must say. I'm nowhere in front of Kalki. What a narration, oh my God. And you will be absorbed, you will become one of the characters, you will be traveling with them. And in one of my interviews, I must definitely say for the B school, they asked me, what will you do? I told them that I will become an entrepreneur. And what will you do later? If I make a lot of money, I will produce a movie called Sivakamiyin Sabatham based on this novel by Kalki. All of them laughed, but I also got the admission into the School of Management, Bharatiya University those days. So this was, the book had inspired me and taken me over so much that I wanted to make a movie based on this book. And it is that kind of a book. And today, friends, I think India should be a country, the kind of country that was envisaged by Mahendra Varma Pallava, by Narasimha Varma Pallava, and they had envisaged it 1400 years ago. Kalki had envisaged it 75 years before. Let us wake up into that great India, into that Mahabharata. Thank you so much. And it is very appropriate that I'm using this Atmanirbhar effort, Vayam, for this discussion today with all of you. And we have been using Vayam only all these days. These guys are doing a great job. This is the kind of Atmanirbhar that Kalki wanted. This is the kind of Atmanirbhar that Mahendra Varma Pallava, Narasimha Varma Pallava, and even their arch rival Pulikeshin II wanted. This is what Harshavardhana wanted. And this is what our people wanted, and this is what is the need of the hour. Let us all try to be Indian, by Indian. Love everybody else, but protect ourselves. Let us awaken into that great India, the great Mahabharata. Thank you so much for being with me today. As ever,